What is up, guys? Welcome back to another Shamshir Sound video. Hope you guys are doing amazing today. We have a Quintino Dirty Dutch / Afrojack big room track that I made. You guys can download the FLP in the video description. Now, before we go ahead and listen to this, remember to smash up the like button. After we listen, we're gonna go ahead and explain each element, why I chose it, and hopefully you guys can take this project and build some amazing stuff from this. Let's go ahead and have a listen. Let's go ahead and take a look at what I did. First was sample selection. I went ahead and chose a kick from Kashmir's pack in E. I was kind of going through different packs, choosing a kick that was more bassy, more kind of low end frequency as opposed to that high end. So when it comes to Quintino style, it's usually that his kicks are more boomy. Now, this isn't to emulate exactly what he does, but it's just a similar type of style. Dirty Dutch, pitchy leads, boomy kicks. This combined with this top kick gave it this punch. From there, I focused on the lead. So let's go ahead and check the lead. The lead is in Massive. So in Massive, I kept it really simple. Just a saw wave, some noise, little bit of feedback. This screen filter is actually not doing anything. It's just adding a little bit of resonance, a little bit of EQ for sparkle, a little bit of delay with the defaults, just so it has this kind of ping pong effect, just for a little bit of delay so that it's not strictly in the middle because it's a mono sound. Speaking of mono in the voicing, monophonic, but also Legato Triller. That's what allows us to do those pitch ups, pitch downs, kind of like a sliding effect with the FL synth. So that's what we're doing here. You can ignore everything else. There's no detune that I did in this instance. There's no panning. With a lot of the sounds that are those pitchy saws, that's what's usually happening. A pitchy square or a pitchy saw, and usually they're pretty mono. I mean, you can feel free to pan these, but again, this is just the sound that I went now. It doesn't mean that it's exactly what you have to replicate. From there, in the time, I dragged it up significantly so that the pitch up and down, the triller, can have a lot of wiggle room, a lot of playroom when it wants to slur. So that way, when we listen to this, you get that you get that slur. So that triller is allowing us to go up and down, pitching it, slurring it, but also it's great when you start experimenting like in this instance here, because then you get this kind of like really jittery type of effect, this kind of Arabic type of effect with playing with Legato Triller. So if you're trying to make something that's like jungle, tribal, Arabic, some sort of weird vibe with the pitch bend, experiment with Legato Triller. Now again, this is monophonic, so this is just one note at a time, and those slurs can do some amazing work. The lead actually doesn't have much on it. I didn't even put a high pass filter or low shelf EQ. You guys can take this project and do with it what you will. I have sausage on there, a little bit of sausage, just for a limiter, a little bit of saturation. The Fruity Peak controller, I played a lot with the volume and the tension and the decay to give it this breathing effect because the Fruity Reverb is connected. The wet knob for Reverb is right now linked to the peak, so that peak control peak, but inverted, so that way you get that breathing effect that I've talked about often in videos. Now with decay, I have it at 1.9 seconds. Low cut I dragged up. High cut I drag down. This is making sure that the reverb elements are not too bright or too much low frequencies, mid frequencies to get in the way of the mix. Reverb is sounding clean. Now, of course, you can get in there, put an EQ before, put an EQ afterwards, but I like to get the reverb relatively clean with the controls that I already have. I did add more pre-delay and I did increase the room size because since the lead was very mono, I wanted to give this reverb kind of this huge stage. And so the pre-delay combined with playing around with these, don't underestimate volume, tension. These knobs can really change how the reverb amount plays into effect. So just keep in mind, if you really want to get a reverb that's bouncy or more harsh, then play around with these three knobs and get it to that desired result. So in the end, the lead ended up sounding pretty clean. I was happy with it. Let's solo the lead. Massive has a pretty pleasant sounding saw, but of course you could do this with Serum or any other plugin. Now, last but not least, I want to cover is the pitch automation. So I did drag envelope 1 here, pitched it up 1 octave so that it has more of a pluck, a very quick decay, so it's barely noticeable, but it just gives a little bit of attack. And then also did the same thing with the white noise there. Overall, from there, just started adding elements. So we can see here on the mixer, we have kick, lead, drop clap, tom, crash, ride, and some other elements like one-shots and kind of effects. So we have some effects that are in the back. These ones here, the downlifter, fall and rise, just some white noise elements to fill the floor. We have some stabs that we see here. So from the revealed packs, just some basic stuff. So let's listen to the drop elements without the lead, and you guys can get an idea on kind of what's going on, what's complementing the lead. Rather than doing like a reverb or backverb for the ride, I found a ride that I liked, and all I did was I just take the ride, right? And I just make unique. When I make unique, I just reverse it, and then I just use that as a sort of backverb into the ride, and it actually sounds very nice. I do the same thing for things like drop claps. So the drop clap, same thing. Usually what I'll do is I'll make it a little bit quieter than the original one, just so that it's kind of fading into it. Often what I'll do too is I'll take it and trim kind of like the initial part, depending on the context. So if it's like a brass one shot, I might take a little bit of that initial hit and just have more of the trail that's being reversed into the original sound that hits on the bar. So there's that one tip there. With these sounds, I actually don't have them being processed at all. There's a delay that turns on just periodically for this go sample right here. But everything else, like these stabs that you see here, most of these don't actually have any effects on them. Just playing around with the volume. That's something that Steve Duda mentioned a lot, was that get volume right before you go to something like EQ. And being that you can control this, you can also use this as a means to double up on sidechain. You can use that to sidechain without an effect, and you can cut to have the effect of like a simulated gate. So depending on what you want to do, if you want the brass to have more reverb and play out longer, you can do that. If you just want like an instantaneous, which is what I did here, you can do this as well. Overall, pretty happy with this. These Hay Effects sample pack, I made it pretty wet. So I put Endless Smile on it with a pretty big amount, close to 50%. Endless Smile is another cheap way that you can just quickly put reverb on something. So wetness and delays add for ambiance, and they make your mix have a background and a foreground. The foreground being the very dry sounds, and the background being those wet sounds. And those wet sounds, the background, if you will, are things like, reverb or delays, things of that nature. Once I was happy with the lead and the kick and some of these drop elements like these drop clap and the ride, started adding some stuff like the Cashmere reverb clap. It was just like an effect. It was just like a one hit. And then started adding some things like a crash. The tom I was not too happy with, but again, I only worked on this for about an hour, give or take. So take this project, work with it. One thing also, which was a great thing that I did, anytime you're feeling like you want to just work quickly, the toms, I believe the toms in Another Sound have Pancake 2 on it. And Pancake 2 is a great way to automate panning without having to draw it each time. Most of the time you can use this. Sometimes it's better to do it in the pattern window, but I like this because it's automating the panning left and right according to the speed that I select and the mix amounts that I choose there. So for those toms, they're being automated left and right, the panning 23%, which helps again with dimension if you want to make sounds not always be in the center, depending on what you want to do. The sounds were sounding pretty good. It gives me kind of like a Quintino, Brazil, or some of the other tracks from Quintino. Keep in mind, that's really what you want to focus on, is a lot of pitch bending, you know, legato triller, saws, squares. I mean, in this instance, the main sound is a saw, and my riser, I believe, is a square in the background. So the riser is just a classic riser. I've made a video about it in the past, and it's just in the back with heavy wetness, and there's a macro for this that is automating not only pitch, going from one octave to the one above, but also the wetness. So macro 1 is automating the pitch, and macro 1 is also automating the dry wet knob there. It also has some high pass filter going on. It has some low pass filter going on, so that it's like just some ambiance sound. It's not like obnoxious or in your face. It's more filling the back. What I also did for effects was that I would mute it on each hit of the drop. So every time the drop began on these 4 bars, I would bring down the volume all the way down in the mixer. And sometimes you can do that. You can get creative if you want something to just halt, stop, especially if it's wet and there's no way around it but to adjust the volume. That's one way to do it. A final thing that I added for the lead was just a little bit of vibrato towards the end. It's barely noticeable, but vibrato can be so pleasing. We have this here, rate. Usually I turn this on, so I should have turned that on probably. Mono. Rate, I put it at about 70, and the depth is what I'm automating. So with this here, and you can get this sound, which is really nice, right? It's something that usually I use the vibrato towards the end of a bar. It's kind of like showcasing that it's reaching a change, like something's happening towards the end. And if we listen to this, the last bar right here, we can get a good idea. So it barely kicks in because it doesn't even play the full notes, you can see there. So I could have even went more extreme like this. It's just subtle, but often it's the subtleties that you do that add up. And towards the end of each bar, I kind of chose some FX elements from different packs that I felt would work. Some of them just completely random, like I took this from one track. So on its own, it sounds stupid, right? But when you chop up stuff, sometimes it works. We can listen here. Let's listen to this last part. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, remember to smash up the like button. If you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and that way you're alerted of the uploads. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Have an amazing day. Take care.